Hello, welcome to Chapter 3, Emerging Business Ethics Issues. If you recall from reading the book in the chapter, you are aware that ethical issues exist all over our organizations every single day. If you open a newspaper again, you're going to see ethical dilemmas related to businesses around the globe. Today we will continue to talk about ethical issues in business, and more specifically, now we're going to talk about how to avoid any kind of sexual misconduct. So there are different ways to avoid sexual misconduct. First of all, you can establish a statement of policy, and you can name someone in the company as ultimately being responsible for preventing harassment at the company. Usually corporations require all employees to go through, let's say, a 2-hour or a half a day sexual harassment awareness workshops. Sometimes companies do it face-to-face. Sometimes they do it online. Sometimes basically self-paced reading that employees read, and then they sign a manual that they understand the conduct. But obviously the best and more fruitful way to do this is to have workshops where employees actually have the opportunity to ask questions, or you can have simulations and role plays of what is correct and what is incorrect in the workplace, and encourage everybody to always role play the professional conducts that are expected of all employees. Second, establish a definition of what sexual harassment basically includes. So usually it includes unwelcome advances, requests for sexual favors, and any other verbal, visual, or physical conduct of a sexual nature. So make sure you provide examples of each to your employees, and remind employees that the list is not all inclusive. So again, the idea here is for everyone to behave professionally and make sure that they are not sexually harassing any other coworker, colleague, or employee. Third, establish non-retaliation policy that protects those individuals who complain or those individuals who are witnesses to such conduct. Because if you retaliate, then there's a lawsuit for that employee who can basically sue you in a court of law, and usually they are going to win if there's a witness or there's some evidence that you retaliated against him or simply because the person complained. Obviously, you have to investigate all cases. If the person is lying, eventually you discover that the person lied, and in that case, you can have penalties against individuals who falsely report cases of misconduct. 4, establish specific procedures for prevention of sexual harassment practices at an early stage. If you have these procedures in writing, then companies are expected by law to train employees in accordance with them, to measure their effect and to ensure the policies are enforced on a consistent basis for all individuals in all cases and throughout the organization. 5th, establish, enforce, and encourage victims of sexual harassment to report the behavior to authorized individuals in your organization, in your department, whether these individuals are internal employees or if you outsource it to outside consultancy firms, then obviously provide the email, the phone number, and all the information that is needed so employees can report it as quickly as possible. 6, establish a reporting procedure. In other words, there should be a methodology for how cases of sexual harassment are reported, ensuring the privacy of all individuals, and how the research will be or the investigation will be conducted. Finally, number 7, make sure the firm has timely reporting requirements to the proper authorities within the organization. One of the other major ethical issues in business is fraud. Fraud is any purposeful communication that deceives, manipulates, or conceals certain facts in order to harm other individuals within the organization or outside the organization, or union members, or public officials, or the government. So fraud can be a crime. Convictions may result in fines, imprisonment, or both to the individual and to the organization who is accused of fraud and found guilty. There could be accounting fraud, there could be fraud triangle, there could be marketing fraud. So make sure you know the various forms of fraud, be aware of them. Accounting fraud usually involves a company's financial reports where they're lying about how much money they have earned or the overall expenses that they've had. So the fraud can be just a few dollars or it can be a few $1,000,000. It doesn't matter whether it's a small amount or a large amount. If you're lying to the government, then you're lying. So be very careful to make sure all your paperwork is according to the rules and policies of the local city, state, and country. Fraud triangle basically represents pressure, opportunity, and rationalization of what you're doing. In marketing, fraud is dishonestly creating, distributing, promoting, and pricing products. So if you're selling a service or a product, again, be very careful to make sure the policies you apply are aligned with facts and you're not misrepresenting and you're not using illegal promotional criteria. Puffery is any exaggerated advertising, blustering, and boasting upon which no reasonable buyer would rely upon. Implied falsity is when the message has a tendency to mislead people, to confuse individuals, and to deceive the general public. So literally it could be true, but it implies a false message to an individual or to a group of people in the public sector. So avoid puffery and avoid implied falsity, and also understand literally false in labeling issues. Also be aware of literally false statements, like claiming that tests prove, or when an advertisement cites a study or test that establishes a claim. If you know it's not true, do not say it. And also, it can include bald assertions, in other words, non-establishment claims, or advertisement making a claim that cannot be substantiated by facts. Be aware of labeling issues. If you cannot guarantee that something is true, do not advertise it. For example, the supermarket giant grocery chain Kroger agreed to remove the raised and humane environment from its packages of chicken. So if you cannot prove that every single chicken was raised in a humane environment, then don't write it. Obviously, if you can prove it, then it's a fact, and then you can obviously write that claim. There's consumer fraud, when consumers attempt to deceive businesses for their own gain. For example, sometimes there's shoplifting or stealing from places. There's collusion, where an employee assists the consumer in a fraud. So you have an insider helping an outsider basically steal from the organization. There's duplicity, where consumer stages an accident in a store and then seeks damages against the store for its lack of attention to the safety standards in that organization. There's guile, which represents a person who is crafty or understands right and wrong behavior, but still uses tricks to obtain an unfair advantage to win a case against an organization, against another person. So all of these could be labeled under consumer fraud. There's also the issue of insider trading. An insider is any officer, director, or owner of 10% or more of a class of a company's securities. There's illegal insider trading and there is legal insider trading. Illegal insider trading represents the buying or selling of stocks by insiders who possess information that is not yet available to the general public. Legal insider trading is legally buying and selling stock in insiders' own company, but not all the time. Insiders are required to report their insider transactions within 2 business days of the date the transaction occurred. Finally, another ethical issue that requires your attention in business is the intellectual property rights issues. In other words, who owns something that was created by research, by thinking, by reflection, by experience intellectually. So intellectual property rights basically means legal protection of intellectual property, like music, like books, in movies. So if you produce a CD, who owns that CD? Is it the organization that basically made it possible for you to record your song? Is it the organization that promotes the CD and the song? Or is it you, the artist, who created the song over years and years by writing the lyrics, practicing it, getting the music together, and so on? So intellectual property rights are another important business issue that is a challenge for many artists, many authors, and many producers of movies, whether it's Hollywood or Bollywood, from being copied illegally in streets or being shown illegally on television stations and so on. If you're working in the US as a manager or as an employee and you're involved in intellectual property rights issues, you should understand the Copyright Act of 1976. When somebody owns something or has copyright for it, another person cannot duplicate it without their written permission. As we're dealing with digital and more electronic issues nowadays, you should also understand the Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998. And you should understand the Digital Theft Deterrence and Copyright Damages Improvement Act of 1999 as well. So good luck being ethical in all cases. Remember, ethical behavior is a skill. You need to please evaluate and improve your ethical muscles every single day. Good luck.